Okay, so the JFK assassination.
Right.
It feels like we should know everything by now. I mean, we live in the information age, but it's still this huge mystery.
Yeah. It's almost like the more information we have, the harder it is to really get to the truth. You know what I mean?
Wow.
It's kind of a paradox.
Totally. It's wild, right? And now we've got this mountain of files, 80,000 JFK assassination files, just dropped on us March 18th, 2025. Like, where do you even begin with that much stuff?
Right. And that's exactly why we're doing this deep dive. Is like your source said, the more data you have, the more you end up kind of lost in the woods, I guess.
I get it. It's like that old story, the blind man and the elephant. Each one touches a different part, and they all think it's something different, right? So we've got all these little pieces of the puzzle, but putting it all together, that's the challenge.
And what's crazy is even in these documents, they're saying some of this stuff is, quote, moderate importance or even negligible. So it's not just about how much there is, it's finding the stuff that really matters.
Okay, so our mission today: sift through it all, try to find those key nuggets of information, zero in on the major players. What did they know? What were they doing? Consider this your express lane through this whole massive document dump. So let's dive in. One name pops up a lot: the CIA.
Oh, yeah. Files 104, 10332, 1000022, and 104, 10322, 10023. They show just how obsessed the CIA was with taking Castro down. This is between 1960 and 64. You've got these huge operations like Operation Mongoose and straight-up assassination attempts on Fidel Castro.
It's easy to forget the context. Cold War's raging. Cuba goes communist. U.S. is freaking out because now they've got a communist country right on their doorstep. These files, they really lay bare just how big they thought that threat was and the lengths they were willing to go to. It was pretty wild. It's kind of scary how much power the CIA seemed to have. It's almost like they were creating this crazy situation where, anything could happen.
Yeah, totally. And in this whole mix, you've got CIA stations mentioned, Moscow, Mexico City, JMWV, that was a big one in Miami, all about Cuba. And guess who shows up at all these places? Lee Harvey Oswald. So how much was the CIA watching him? And what did they know about him? And when? That's the big question.
Right. It's not just that they were watching, it's what they were seeing and what it meant. Then you've got these names: Howard Hunt, David Phillips, Winston Scott, all tied to anti-Cuba stuff. And even if these files don't directly link them to the assassination, they were definitely swimming in those murky waters of, espionage and covert ops. It just makes you wonder, right?
If you think about it, there were a bunch of people who had really good reasons to want to get rid of Kennedy, and they had the ways and means to do it. It's like the CIA created this environment where things could go really wrong really easily.
Here's a detail that'll make you stop and think: this operation called AIM-LSH. The files talk about a CIA agent getting a poison pen, like a pen with poison in it. And this is all for some anti-Castro scheme, right around when JFK was killed. Pretty freaky coincidence, right?
That's more than just a coincidence. That tells you something about the kind of stuff the CIA was up to. Even if it had nothing to do with the assassination, it shows you just how crazy things were at that time.
And then there's this idea of plausible deniability. Basically, the CIA could be involved in all this crazy stuff, but still be able to say, nope, wasn't us. They're creating all this distance, so it's almost impossible to know what they did or didn't do. No wonder conspiracy theories are running wild, even if they're saying it was just Oswald acting alone.
And this raises another question. How much did President Kennedy actually know about all these crazy plots the CIA was cooking up?
Which brings us to the White House angle. Okay, so these files, they don't give us a ton from Kennedy's White House directly, but there's this interesting tidbit in file 124, 10326, 10149. It says a CIA guy named Herbert told this Michael J.P. Malone that JFK did have a plan for Cuba. Like, if there was a crisis, he would take action. That doesn't really line up with what we hear later, especially from LBJ, who seemed to think Kennedy didn't have a clear strategy.
It makes you wonder if people saw Kennedy's stance on Cuba differently. Maybe different people in the White House had different ideas about how to handle Castro.
It kind of feels like maybe they kept JFK out of the loop on some of the really crazy CIA stuff, like the mafia stuff. You'd think the president would have to know about that.
Yeah, for sure. And from what we know from later investigations, some of his advisors basically said he wasn't told about the really bad stuff the CIA was doing.
And after the assassination, Johnson's White House was super worried about those conspiracy theories. They really wanted to stick with the Oswald acted alone story. You can see that in Edmund Cohen's 1998 memo. It's mentioned in file 104, 10332, 10023. I mean, they were trying to keep the country from falling apart.
Right. And if you connect that back to the CIA, the White House wanting a simple story probably made the CIA want to hide anything that made them look bad.
So let's change gears. What about Cuba? What about Fidel Castro? These files show just how much the U.S. wanted to get rid of him. Like, it's intense. Just look at 104, 10332, 10022. There were so many plots against Castro.
Castro was living under constant threat. The Bay of Pigs invasion, the Cuban Missile Crisis, all those assassination attempts, and he survived them all. That made him this iconic revolutionary figure. Like, he was David standing up to the American Goliath. It's like a paradox, right? Kennedy won the missile crisis, but Castro's survival shows how hard it is to just crush a revolution, even with all that American power.
Right. It's like Castro won in the long run. He lived way longer than JFK, stayed in power until 2008, and died naturally. He basically survived everything the U.S. threw at him. Then there's this backfire theory. People like John Roselli talked about it. The idea is that Castro might have actually hit back at Kennedy using his mob connections, the same connections the CIA was using. It's a bit of a stretch, but it kind of fits. If you're Cuba and you're constantly being attacked, you might just lash out.
Yeah, and you can see it as Castro winning by just outlasting everyone. He lived a long life, stayed in power in Cuba for decades after Kennedy was gone.
Yeah.
He basically survived the Cold War, the U.S. trying to take him down. It's pretty remarkable.
Okay, now let's look at the Soviet Union. These files don't have a ton on them directly, but there are some mentions. Moscow Station, Oswald's time in Minsk, this KGB guy, Valery Kostakov in Mexico City. It's all in file 104, 10332, 10022. It's clear the CIA was looking for any Soviet connection to Oswald and Cuba.
Now remember, this is just a year after the Cuban Missile Crisis. Khrushchev backed down to Kennedy, which was a big embarrassment for the Soviets. Do you think they would risk another showdown with the U.S. by being involved in Kennedy's assassination? It's hard to say for sure, but you got to think about that context.
Right. They probably weren't eager to stir things up again after that. Now, what about other countries? The source mentions the CIA using countries like Spain, Belgium, France, Uruguay, Costa Rica for their anti-Castro shenanigans. This was all part of something called the Cuba Project, file 202-1001-10203. So it wasn't just the U.S. and Cuba, it was a whole global network.
Exactly. The Cold War was everywhere, and the U.S. was using its allies to try and get rid of communism in Cuba. It shows just how messy the whole situation was and how easy it would be for things to go wrong.
Then you've got this little detail about the Soviet embassy in Havana. File 124-90138-10073 mentions them ordering a bunch of safes. It sounds like something out of a spy movie, right? Like, what secrets were they trying to hide?
Well, if you're in the spy business, keeping your secrets safe is really important. Ordering all those safes shows you how close the Soviets and Cubans were working together. Cuba was a really important ally for the Soviets in the West.
Our outline mentions this Jews guards thing, but I gotta say, I haven't seen anything about that in these files or anywhere else, really.
Yeah, you're right. The files and all the serious research don't say anything about Jewish guards and the JFK assassination. It might be people getting things mixed up or just some crazy conspiracy theory with no evidence behind it. It's important to stick with the facts, especially if it's something as big as this.
Exactly. This is about the CIA, the White House, Cuba, the Soviet Union, all caught up in this Cold War mess. Okay, so let's talk about this idea of who won JFK or Castro. It's not so simple, right?
No, it's not. If we look at JFK, he definitely scored a win with the Cuban Missile Crisis in '62. He stood up to the Soviets, they backed down, and we probably avoided nuclear war. File 104-10332-10022 shows just how closely the CIA was watching Cuba and the Soviets during this whole thing. It was a big deal. And Kennedy looked like a strong leader on the world stage.
But then you have Castro. He just kept surviving. Seriously, look at all the CIA plots that failed to get rid of him. They're in files 104-10332, 1000022, and 202-1000203. It's mind-blowing. He went through so much and came out on top. He lived longer than Kennedy, stayed in power way longer, and became this symbol of resistance against the U.S.
Exactly. It's like Kennedy won a battle, but Castro won the war. You could say Kennedy won strategically with the missile crisis, but Castro won politically by just staying alive and in power.
So maybe it was more of a draw. Kennedy won a round, but Castro had the staying power. Kind of like the source said, a mixed outcome. Kennedy won a battle, but Castro won the war for survival. Both of them did some good things and had some pretty big failures. What parts of these files really surprised you?
Honestly, that Amelash poison pen thing, the timing is just so creepy. Right when JFK is killed, the CIA guy gets a poison pen. Makes you wonder, even if it was just a crazy coincidence.
I know, right? And the CIA was working with some shady folks. mobsters, using other countries to do their dirty work, like file 202-1000110203 shows. It makes you realize how messy and dangerous these secret operations can be.
And then there's that whole thing about how worried the CIA and the White House were about those conspiracy theories. It's in file 104-10332-10023. Even they weren't sure if the official story was the whole truth.
So why do we have 80,000 files all of a sudden? Where did all this stuff come from?
Well, it's basically a mountain of records they've been collecting for decades. Because of the JFK Assassination Records Collection Act, they had to save everything. And it's not just about the assassination itself, it's about the investigations, the intelligence they gathered, the Cold War stuff, Oswald, Cuba, all of it.
And why did it take so long for these files to come out? It's been over 60 years since JFK was killed.
It's complicated. At first, it was all super secret because of national security. But then you've got the CIA and the FBI dragging their feet. They didn't want to release anything because they were afraid of hurting their spies and their methods. They kept asking for more time, even after the 1992 Act said everything had to be out in 25 years. And then there's the fact that they had to go through tons of old paper documents, scan them, and black out all the secret stuff. That takes time.
So why now? Why March of 2025?
Looks like it was Trump's doing. He promised to release all the JFK files when he was running for a second term, and he actually did it. Early 2025, he made an executive order, and here we are. He said it was about transparency, but there's a political angle too, right? A lot of people believe those conspiracy theories, and this might have been a way to get them on his side. But most experts think there's not going to be some huge bombshell in these files. Still, people are obsessed with the JFK assassination, and they've been demanding answers for years. That probably played a part too.
So after digging into all this, it seems like these files, they don't really give us the answer to the JFK mystery. It might even make things more confusing.
Yeah, we're right back where we started. So much information, but still no clear picture of what happened that day in Dallas.
It really makes you think. We've got all these different players, their hidden motives, a ton of information that doesn't always make sense. Is there any piece of evidence out there that could change how we understand what happened? And maybe more importantly, are we just trying to make sense of something that's impossible to fully understand? It's something to think about even after this deep dive is over.